When Karen's plasma TV exploded during her live-streamed makeup tutorial and she blamed malevolent spirits in the wiring, I just about fell out of my chair laughing. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that every puff of smoke, every shower of sparks, every blown fuse and scorched outlet in her house, started because she decided to steal solar power from my backyard shed. And when she got greedy, I got electrical. See, I didn't just flip a switch. I calibrated the surge to fry every unregulated appliance she owned. Not out of malice, out of science. Because if you're going to reroute my off-grid solar system for your little wine fridge and 5 air fryers, Karen, you better be ready for thermodynamics to clap back. It all started 2 months ago. I'd gone on a weekend camping trip with no cell service, just the way I liked it. I returned Sunday night to find the LED indicator on my shed blinking red, the kind of red that means, hey, you're about to lose $1,000 worth of battery life. At first I assumed a short or maybe a firmware glitch, but when I connected to the monitoring software on my tablet, the data made my stomach drop. While I was away, my solar system had experienced a sustained 18-hour power draw, consistent, high load usage, way above what my shed or emergency cabin would ever use. And it wasn't a system error. My logs were clean. Someone had physically tapped in. Now, I'm not your average solar hobbyist. I designed my setup during a year-long sabbatical from my engineering firm. It's a high-efficiency, battery-buffered, inverter-balanced rig with digital telemetry and a remote kill switch. Basically, it's the Tesla of backyard solar. So someone breaking into it wasn't just criminal, it was personal. And dumb. I followed the logs, then traced the wires. Physically. That meant going under the shed floorboards, popping up soil panels, and eventually hitting a freshly disturbed patch of ground near the fence. A narrow PVC conduit had been buried just inches below the grass line, running from my system, under the fence and directly into Karen's backyard. Not to the utility junction, not to a shared transformer. To Karen's freaking garden gnome. Or more accurately, the hollowed-out base of it, which served as the cover for a junction box. I stared at it in disbelief. She didn't even try to hide the splice with any finesse. Cheap duct tape, off-market copper wiring, and some kind of janky splitter that would have made a real electrician cry. I opened the box and instantly recognized the red tape my brand used. She hadn't just stolen any solar. She'd stolen mine. I knocked on her door. She answered with the kind of smug smile only people born in the late 70s and raised on reality TV can conjure. Her hair was tied in a leopard print bandana. She had a mimosa in one hand and a little white lapdog in the other. "Can I help you?" she said, already playing the innocent victim. "Yeah," I said, calm as anything. "You've got about 30 kilowatt-hours of my power running through your fake garden gnome. Want to explain that?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, that," she said breezily. "My nephew's an electrician. He said your panels were overproducing and going to waste. So we redirected some. For the good of the community." "The good of the—" I blinked. "Karen, you spliced into my private off-grid system. That's illegal." She scoffed. "The HOA approved the easement. I filed a variance request last month. I looked it up later. She had filed a temporary variance to utilize excess private solar power for community benefit. And the HOA, which, fun fact, Karen chaired, had rubber-stamped it without even informing me. The document even cited some half-baked eco-sharing clause from a 1990s bylaws draft nobody had read in 20 years. I brought it up at the next HOA meeting, expecting at least mild outrage. What I got was a 3-minute gaslighting session followed by a "thanks for supporting the neighborhood with your generous energy contributions." Karen just sat at the head of the table, sipping her cucumber water and smiling like she'd just invented sliced bread. Meanwhile, I was staring down the barrel of $1,000 monthly loss if this kept up. So I stopped talking. I started scheming. Karen thought she was draining my power. She had no idea I just started charging up. The first thing I did was upgrade my surveillance. I wasn't just going to watch Karen steal my power, I was going to document every volt of it. I installed a hidden thermal camera inside the gable vent of my shed, which let me see power draw in real time. I mounted a pair of vibration sensors along the buried conduit line to track changes in cable load, and I dropped a discrete voltage tap into the outgoing line. In short, I knew exactly when Karen's stolen power was being used, how much of it she was taking, and which appliance was sucking it dry. She was a thief, and I was turning into a forensic electrician with a vendetta. Sure enough, her usage climbed daily. She'd started modestly, charging her Tesla at night, running a few extra AC units. Then it got absurd. One day she left her sprinkler system, pool pump, and garage lights on while blasting music through an outdoor speaker system. Her house practically lit up like Times Square after sundown. I confirmed her energy usage had quadrupled in 2 weeks, all courtesy of my off-grid setup. So, naturally, I confronted the HOA again. This time I brought graphs, evidence, sensor logs, a side-by-side heat map of my battery bank before and after her tap-in. They nodded politely, thanked me for my data science, and told me I should be proud to contribute to a greener neighborhood. One of them even suggested I donate a second battery bank for overflow. I nearly choked on my own sarcasm. These weren't neighbors. They were bureaucratic leeches with matching polos and matching delusions. The worst part? Every complaint I filed went nowhere. The police shrugged, said it was a civil matter. The power company, predictably, wanted nothing to do with it since I was off-grid. My emails to the County Utilities Board were buried under legal jargon and pending review. Karen knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew how to hide behind red tape and HOA bylaws. But what she didn't know was that I'd finally found her weak spot. Her nephew. Certified electrician, she had called him. That certification turned out to be a $15 printout from a dodgy online course with a checkout page that looked like it belonged to a pirate DVD site. The guy had no license, no insurance, and apparently believed grounding wires were optional if you wore rubber shoes. And he was the one who wired the illegal junction from my system to hers. That was the crack in the wall I needed. Because if I could prove the installation was hazardous, and I could, then I had grounds for legal retaliation. But I didn't want to wait months for the courts. So I called in a friend. Rajiv works as a grid stability engineer for a regional energy provider. He builds surge protectors the size of refrigerators and calibrates them to weather lightning storms. I sent him pictures of the junction, the wiring, even the current draw patterns. He took one look and said, "Want me to help you build a feedback loop?" I grinned. Yes. One that zaps like karma in a microwave. We spent the weekend building a legal, safe, but utterly destructive little trap. The idea was simple. I couldn't booby-trap her line directly. That would be illegal and dangerous. But I could rig a dummy inverter that simulated normal voltage up to a point. Then overloaded its return line if the draw spiked too high. The second she tried to pull more than a preset wattage, the system would spike back in a high-voltage feedback loop. Not enough to start a fire, but enough to cook a blender or two. Everything was isolated, tested, and built inside a shielded dummy panel behind my shed. We set the trip threshold just below what she'd pull when running multiple appliances. Rajiv even added a time delay for extra dramatic effect. Let her think everything was normal before the big zap. Then we covered the whole rig in a camo case and waited. The opportunity came faster than I thought. That Tuesday, Karen threw a brunch and broadband event, some weird hybrid social mixer and livestream collab with her influencer cousin. The whole neighborhood was invited. Her house was prepped like a power-sucking death trap. 6 ceiling fans ran at full tilt. Coffee makers, mimosas chillers, griddles. She even had a cotton candy machine on the patio. All running. All powered by me. I watched the current spike in real time on my panel. She tripped the threshold at 11:23 a.m. The delay kicked in. 5 seconds. 10. At 15 seconds, the feedback surge began. First it was subtle. A flicker in the lights. Then one of her chandeliers popped, raining cheap crystal onto a table of crustless sandwiches. Screams. Another flicker. The toaster exploded in a puff of smoke and a flash of orange sparks. A hair straightener shot out a ribbon of flame like a birthday candle from hell. By the time her garage door slammed shut on its own and her Wi-Fi router caught fire mid-livestream, she was sprinting through her lawn in leopard print flats and screaming something about Russian cyberattacks. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my porch, lemonade in hand, watching the chaos unfold like the 4th of July meta soap opera. Naturally, she blamed me. She marched up to my property in a frenzy of static-charged hair and mascara streak. Her little dog barked like it was possessed. She accused me of hacking her house, sabotaging her event, and being part of a male-dominated conspiracy to silence female voices in energy spaces. I handed her a brochure I printed the night before. It was titled, The Financial and Legal Consequences of Unauthorized Power Theft, and it included a pie chart showing typical damage costs when appliances receive voltage spike. She tore it in half and stomped off. But her face told me everything I needed to know. She'd been hit. Hard. And she wasn't going to take it lying down. I knew retaliation was coming. She wasn't just angry, she was embarrassed. Her livestream had glitched out just as she was mid-pitch on a brand partnership. The last frame, still circulating on social media, showed her mouth wide open in panic, while smoke rose behind her like a volcano of idiocy. Sure enough, that night, I got a knock on the door. 2 cops. Flashlights. Polite but serious. One of them asked if I'd recently sabotaged a neighbor's home electrical system. I calmly invited them in, showed them my logs, my wiring diagrams, and a video of Karen's illegal splice. I showed them the dummy inverter and how it operated within safe legal limit. I even offered them a bottle of water while they watched the footage of her garden gnome junction erupting like a cheap fireworks stand. The lead officer nodded, then sighed. Okay, this is a mess. Oh, don't worry, I said, gesturing to the power graph on my screen. It gets messy, eh? Because Karen had just made the mistake of escalating. And I was about to escalate right back. By the next morning, Karen's house looked like it had lost a fight with a small electrical tornado. Her lawn was littered with half-melted extension cords, scorched surge protectors, and what looked like the charred remains of a countertop waffle maker. The police hadn't made any arrests, but they had definitely left with raised eyebrows and more than a few photographs. And while Karen raged around her yard like a caffeinated warlord in house slippers, I quietly set up a new trail camera angled directly at her gnome junction box, just in case she got any cute ideas about round 2. But Karen wasn't the kind of person who learned lessons. She was the kind who doubled down. By noon, she had 2 guys in neon vests and a rusty utility truck parked in her driveway. I watched from my office window as they unloaded a mess of tools and cables, then walked straight into her backyard like it was totally normal to resplice a stolen energy tap hours after it nearly turned your toaster into a grenade. One of the guys had a tool belt made of duct tape. The other was vaping through the whole job. Professionalism was clearly not on the invoice. Still, they got it done. My meters lit up again around 2:15 p.m. The line was live. She was back in business. This time, though, I didn't engage. I didn't say a word. I didn't report it. I just let her take. Let her leech. Let her think the game was over. Because what she didn't realize was that the new splice had thrown her whole system even further out of balance. Her electrician nephew had bypassed the grounding entirely, rerouted the inverter's neutral, and essentially turned her house into an unstable firecracker waiting for a spark. And what better time for that spark than when she invited people over again? Which, of course, she did. Saturday afternoon. Karen's comeback brunch. Flyers went out. Instagram invites. She even tagged the HOA's official account like this was some kind of sponsored redemption arc. I knew exactly how it would go. Her brunch started around 11 a.m. I watched as the lawn chairs filled up with neighborhood sycophants, everyone who had pretended not to notice the previous fiasco now sipping mimosas under patio umbrellas, smiling as if their host's house hadn't just tried to electrocute them last week. Karen, resplendent in a flamingo pink sundress and matching heels, stood by the mimosa bar, clearly trying to pretend her hair wasn't still recovering from last weekend's static shock frizz. Everything hummed along for about 20 minutes, and then, just like clockwork, the overload began. Her blender started making a weird whining noise, like it was auditioning for a horror film. Then the pool pump started rattling. The electric ice cream maker on the porch began vibrating sideways off the table. One of her guests tried to plug in their phone and got a mild zap that made her drop her drink. I was in my shed, watching it all unfold on my laptop like it was a nature documentary. My voltage tap registered a massive surge spike, way beyond even the previous feedback loop. I hadn't touched the rig since Tuesday. It was the same safe setup. But Karen's nephew had added new lines without balancing anything. The feedback loop triggered automatically the second it detected overload. I didn't even have to press a button. Suddenly, her whole backyard went from peaceful suburban brunch to science fair disaster. The chandelier inside her dining room exploded first, glass everywhere, wires dangling like jungle vines. Then one of her guests' laptops sparked and caught fire. People screamed and bolted. The cotton candy machine actually caught wind, rolled off the porch, and burst into flame like a sugary meteor on her lawn. The pool pump coughed once, then sprayed water straight up in the air like a busted geyser. And then, the grand finale. The garage door slammed shut on its own and locked in place. Karen screamed at someone to unplug everything. Her little dog ran in frantic circles. Her nephew emerged from the back door holding a fried laptop and what I swear looked like a partially melted Wi-Fi router. By now, several neighbors had pulled out phones, videos, live streams. I could already see the hashtags writing themselves. Hashtag Karen Blackout, hashtag BrunchBomb, hashtag SolarSlam. But the best part? Karen didn't even try to blame me this time. Not out loud. Not with cops and cameras and 30 guests watching her backyard resemble a circuit board meltdown. She just stood there, holding her drink like it was a life preserver, blinking slowly as her brunch dissolved into smoke, sparks, and fleeing guests. And when one of her folding tables actually collapsed from the heat of a smoldering crockpot, she just let out this low, guttural scream that sounded like a tea kettle on its last breath. She still wasn't done, though. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the scorched smell of electrical failure lingered in the air, she came stomping up to my driveway. No entourage. No dog. Just fury. She waved a half-burned power strip at me like it was a weapon. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I think it's physics." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. But nothing came out. Just that weird fish-like expression people make when they can't believe they lost. Then she tried a different tactic. "I'm going to sue you." For what? For building a safe and legal off-grid power system? Or for you illegally connecting to it and then electrocuting yourself with your own incompetence? I have a lawyer. Great. I have logs, timestamps, voltage records, camera footage, and a witness from a state-certified grid engineer. You want to play court? Let's play. That shut her up. But the best was still coming. The next morning, 2 police cars returned. They knocked. I welcomed them again, showed them updated footage. But this time, they didn't leave to file reports. They walked straight over to Karen's house. Apparently, one of her guests had filed a formal complaint after getting minor burns from a metal chair during the brunch fiasco. Combined with my evidence, that was enough to open a case. And wouldn't you know it, Karen, being Karen, managed to talk herself into a corner. She admitted, on Bodycam, that yes, she had authorized her nephew to borrow energy from my solar shed. She claimed she was reallocating wasted green resources for ethical redistribution. The officer blinked. Ma'am, you're describing utility theft and unauthorized tampering. Karen froze. Then, like any true HOA Karen, she tried to pull rank. I'm the acting board chair of this neighborhood. I have the right to reassign shared power. The officer responded with the grace of a saint. You also have the right to remain silent. And that's how Karen earned herself a citation for energy theft, utility tampering, and endangering guests with faulty wiring. The cherry on top? The county utility board, after seeing the footage and diagrams, launched a full investigation. And I, ever the helpful neighbor, volunteered to provide a full technical breakdown of Karen's janky illegal tap-in. They accepted. Karen had no clue what was coming next. But I did. Because revenge wasn't over. It was just heating up. A citation, a court date, and a warning from the County Utilities Board. She did what every overconfident HOA tyrant would do. She doubled down, louder and more aggressively than before. She showed up at the next HOA meeting with a stack of prepared remarks, a new bob haircut, and enough perfume to trigger a fire alarm. She demanded that the HOA form a special energy usage committee to investigate off-grid abuse. The room stank of hypocrisy and desperation. She turned the meeting into a circus, claimed I was running a rogue electrical operation from my shed, said my system was a threat to the grid, even though it wasn't even connected to it. She flailed a printed-out picture of her burnt toaster like it was a murder weapon. And as if that weren't enough, she then tried to submit an emergency motion to seize my solar equipment for neighborhood safety. It was laughable. It was also terrifying, because 3 of the board members actually nodded. Karen had been on that HOA for years. She'd hosted barbecues, handed out pool passes, and blackmailed more than one neighbor with passive-aggressive Christmas cards. She had clout. And if she couldn't beat me legally, she was going to try to weaponize the very HOA she controlled. Fortunately, she made a critical mistake that night. She brought the cops back into it. She had invited the same 2 officers who'd cited her, hoping to paint herself as the victim. Bad idea. They stood in the back quietly while she babbled on about electrical terrorism, but when the floor was opened, the lead officer calmly stepped forward. He said, "Just to clarify, we found no fault with Mr. Blake's power system. It was not connected to the grid. The illegal connection was discovered on Mrs. Parker's property. She admitted this on Bodycam, which has been submitted to the county prosecutor's office." Silence. Absolute, golden, delicious silence. Karen blinked, then tried to pivot. "Well, that's not the whole story. I was misled by my nephew. He also confessed," the officer said, deadpan. "He thought he was connecting to a backup line." She turned red. One of the board members quietly pushed the emergency motion form back across the table and said, "I think we'll need to revisit this next quarter." Karen didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. But she wasn't done trying to save face. 2 days later, she posted a ranting Facebook Live video, claiming she was the target of a tech-savvy neighbor conspiracy, and that her brunch had been sabotaged by radicalized electricians. She even name-dropped me, called me Blake the Blackout Bandit. My phone blew up from friends laughing about it. Some even suggested I put it on a t-shirt. And then came the real kicker. I got an email from the County Utilities Commission. They had concluded their preliminary investigation. Not only was Karen's wiring illegal and dangerous, but her house had racked up enough code violations to warrant a full inspection. They were coming in 2 weeks. Now I knew Karen. She wasn't going to sit around and wait to be humiliated again. Sure enough, a few days later, she was at it again, this time trying to rewire the original junction. She waited until dark, brought her nephew back, and had him digging around the garden gnome like a pair of raccoons with a grudge. They didn't realize I had upgraded my cameras to infrared. So I sent the footage, quietly, to the county inspector. No need for drama. Let the violations speak for themselves. The inspection was thorough. Brutal, even. They found not just the illegal splice, but ungrounded panels, a homemade battery bank in her garage, and evidence of reversed polarity in 3 separate circuits. One inspector called it a ticking voltage bomb. Another called it every safety code violation in one suburban ranch home. Her house was immediately red-tagged for partial shutdown. Anything electric that wasn't code-compliant was to be powered off until fixed, which was, in short, almost everything. Pool pump, HVAC, half the kitchen. Her wall-mounted wine chiller was declared a fire hazard. And, as a final insult, the digital assistant in her living room was locked out due to power instability. Alexa had left the building. But I wasn't just sitting back and watching anymore. I was making moves. I'd been quietly buying into the local solar cooperative for years. One of those niche investor programs that lets you fund neighborhood-level green energy. Turns out, my shares had matured. I now owned a minority stake in the very company the HOA had contracted to manage future energy initiative, including, fun fact, residential compliance partnership, which meant I could now walk into an HOA board meeting and say, with a completely straight face, as a vested stakeholder in Sunreach Power Cooperative, I'd like to recommend we update our energy compliance guidelines. And when Karen opened her mouth to object, the board president, who had just received a compliance fine of her own for using Karen's installer, shut her down instantly. But Karen wasn't just losing power. She was losing support. Neighbors had seen the live streams, read the reports, watched their own surge protectors glow orange and collapse. The tide was turning. People were fed up with her drama, her lies, and her uncanny ability to turn brunch into a crime scene. And yet, just when I thought she might finally back off, she pulled one last wild card. She announced, loudly, on the HOA forum, that she was running for HOA president again. Said she was reclaiming her leadership role to protect the community from unscrupulous technical predators. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so dangerous, because some people still liked her. Some genuinely believed her nonsense. And a few, frankly, were just bored retirees who voted for whoever brought cupcakes to the meetings. So I ran too. Only I didn't just run. I documented everything. I made flyers with timelines, citations, photos of fried appliances, and a lovely little QR code linking to the county violation report. I called it Karen's Greatest Hits, a cautionary tale in 5 circuits. On election day, I showed up in a polo shirt and khakis, smiled politely, and handed out solar-powered flashlights to everyone who came to vote. Courtesy of your future HOA president, I said. Karen, meanwhile, paced the sidewalk in high heels, handing out mini-muffins and yelling at squirrels. The votes weren't even close. I won in a landslide. First order of business? New bylaw. Any unauthorized connection to private energy systems results in immediate expulsion from the HOA. Second order. Independent safety inspections for all board members' homes. Third. Publicly post all pending violation fines on a digital sign in my yard. Karen's name lit up like Christmas morning. She tried to appeal. Claimed the sign was harassment. But the board, my board, voted to keep it up for transparency. She finally snapped. Packed up in the middle of the night. U-Haul. Screaming match with her nephew. At one point she hurled a broken surge protector into her lawn like a discus. By dawn, she was gone. The garden gnome? Still there. Melted at the base. I kept it. Spray-painted it gold. It watches over my battery bank now, like a tiny, angry guardian of karma. I thought about tearing down the sign after she left. But I didn't. Because as it turns out, the sign is kind of useful. And besides, it still has room for more names. 3 weeks after Karen fled in a haze of burnt extension cords and public disgrace, the neighborhood felt quiet. Almost suspiciously so. No more early morning HOA compliance visits, where she'd walk around with a clipboard pretending to be the power police. No more passive-aggressive emails to the neighborhood listserv about residents who flagrantly disrespect safety protocol. No more threats about citing kids for sidewalk chalk or measuring lawn heights with a laser level. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free from the tyranny of leopard print dictatorship. But I wasn't done. Not yet. See, Karen had left a mess. And not just the physical one. The scorched siding, melted power box, and dented mailbox from when she backed into it in a rage during her U-Haul exit. No, I'm talking about the digital mess. Her name was still on dozens of HOA forms, permissions, variances, budget approvals. I started getting emails from vendors who hadn't been paid, contractors whose jobs had been mysteriously canceled, and one unfortunate landscaper who showed up to mow a lawn that had been declared wildlife restoration property by Karen's last solo vote. So I rolled up my sleeves. Because if I was going to be the new HOA president, I was going to clean house. Literally. First, I requested a full audit of all Karen-era decisions. Every variance, every budget change, every community beautification project, she'd approved without a vote. It was a disaster. Turns out, Karen had reclassified her own driveway as a private emergency access lane, just to justify installing a personalized street lamp. That street lamp? Wired illegally. Pulled power from a circuit she had spliced into someone else's outdoor outlet. Not mine, this time. Poor Mrs. Garcia across the street, who hadn't understood why her Christmas lights made the porch smell like burning plastic. We fixed that. Then we tackled her community inspiration board, a metal signpost where she had posted weekly Karen quotes, passive-aggressive slogans like "Cleanliness is next to HOA compliance," and "If you're not helping, you're hindering." I had the board removed and replaced it with a solar-powered LED display showing real-time neighborhood power consumption trend. Transparent, useful, and powered by the same system she'd tried to hijack. I wasn't just purging Karen's legacy, I was redesigning the HOA from the ground up. We implemented energy credits for residents who invested in solar, battery storage, or efficiency upgrade. No more arbitrary fines for non-regulation mailbox paint. Instead, we offered discounts for eco-friendly landscaping and free mulch for gardens. The whole vibe of the neighborhood shifted from fear and fines to incentives and innovation. And the best part? The residents actually liked it. For the first time in HOA history, people volunteered for committees. We had a wait list for community garden plot. Even the cranky couple on the corner, who hadn't attended a meeting in 8 years, showed up with a homemade pie. The HOA had gone from Karen's personal soapbox to an actual community platform. And all it took was one power-hungry narcissist lighting her house on fire with stolen electricity. But Karen? She couldn't stay away. Oh no. I knew she was lurking. Her social media went dark for a while, but then it came back. New username, same attitude. Now she was on a crusade. Claimed she'd been unjustly exiled from her own neighborhood by a secret cabal of technocrats. She started posting blurry screenshots of HOA documents, trying to spin her removal as a hostile energy takeover. My favorite post read, "They weaponized sunlight against me." I printed it and framed it in the shed. Then one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a local real estate agent. "Hey, Mr. Blake," she said hesitantly. "I wanted to give you a heads up. There's a woman looking at property in your neighborhood. Said she used to live here, wants to come back. Her name's Karen Parker?" Silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Yeah, that's the one." I thanked her. Hung up. Then activated protocol. Never again. I called an emergency HOA meeting. Presented the board with a new amendment proposal. No resident with a confirmed history of HOA code violations resulting in criminal charges or utility tampering investigations may be reproved for residency without a 75% community vote. I called it the Karen Clause. It passed unanimously. The next day, she showed up. Bold as ever. Black SUV. Designer sunglasses. Clipboard. Probably thought she could bluff her way back in with a new hair color and a fake smile. She strutted up to the same realtor's open house she had once helped shut down for excessive mulch usage. And then she saw the sign. It was big, beautiful, positioned at the neighborhood entrance, LED lit, and it cycled through every new HOA rule in bold text. Right in the middle, sandwiched between Solar Credit Initiative and Garden Expansion Grants, was a line that made her freeze. No reentry for former residents with utility theft convictions. HOA Bylaw 9.7b. She turned, spotted me leaning against my truck, sipping lemonade again. Our eyes met. She hesitated. For once, she didn't scream, didn't rant. Just stared at the sign, then back at me, and mouthed something I'll never forget. You win. And you know what? It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like equilibrium. The neighborhood had balance again. And while I didn't need her to say the words, I appreciated the closure. A week later, her social media went dark again. No more conspiracy posts. No more photoshopped pie charts claiming I was hoarding what's. Just silence. Peace. A suburb free of voltage vampires and brunch saboteurs. And me? I kept building. I expanded my solar array. Opened it up as a microgrid for emergencies. We had our first neighborhood movie night powered entirely by sunshine. I even gave a talk at a local energy expo titled, How I Accidentally Invented Revenge Through Renewable Energy. But my favorite addition? The gnome. It still sits on a pedestal next to my battery shed, spray-painted metallic gold. I added a tiny plaque. In memory of Karen's current, may it never return. And at night it lights up, powered by stolen sunshine, reclaimed, repurposed, and redirected. Because the best revenge isn't just watching someone self-destruct. It's building something brighter with the spa.